Hey, welcome back to the Selling Point podcast. My name's Anthony Nix, and I am the founder of Transformative Sales Systems. And if you guys have been following, you know, over the last several weeks, we've been talking about sales qualification and the different aspects of qualifying opportunities. And, you know, we've talked about why deals stall, why proposals get ghosted, why prospects suddenly say the price is too high, and why discovery conversations that feel real comfortable often fail to uncover real buying criteria. And now this episode is the final piece in that series. And the title of this one is, Sales Qualification in CRM Stages, Why Your Pipeline is Lying to You. And this might be one of the most important ones of the series. And I know it frustrates a lot of owners, a lot of CEOs and sales leaders. And that's the idea that your pipeline might not actually be true. It might be telling you a fable and lying to you. Most of the time, the pipeline isn't actually lying because anyone is really trying to deceive leadership or that. This is not about salespeople trying to manipulate numbers or hiding information. In most companies, and especially in small and mid-sized businesses, the pipeline just becomes unreliable for a much, much simpler reason. And that's the CRM stages are based on activity instead of qualification. And once you have a CRM, a pipeline stages that are activity driven, the pipeline starts telling stories that sound really good, but it actually isn't true. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. One of the most common conversations that I have with CEOs goes something kind of like this. They'll say, hey, Anthony, the pipeline looks fine. The team says they have plenty of opportunities, but the revenue still isn't showing up. Does that sound familiar in your business? When I hear that, my first instinct is not to question the market or the product or the service. My first instinct is to look how the pipeline is being managed. Because if deals are being advanced through the CRM, through the pipeline, simply just because something happened, a call, a meeting, a proposal was sent out, then the pipeline just starts filling up with opportunities that might feel real, but they haven't actually earned the right to be in the pipeline. And then that's where the trouble starts. One of the biggest misunderstandings in sales is the difference between activity and qualification. Activity is something the salesperson does. Qualification is something the buyer proves. And that distinction is incredibly important. A discovery call is just activity. A demo is just activity. Sending a proposal is merely activity. None of those things automatically mean the deal is real. Qualification, on the other hand, means the buyer has proved with evidence that the opportunity is legitimate. That evidence might include things like a clearly defined problem, some measurable impact on their business, a known decision process on the buyer's side, the identification of the stakeholders in the business, an actual timeline, and a next step both parties have agreed to. When those elements are present, the opportunity is now qualified. When they're missing, the deal may still be interesting, seem interesting, but it is not ready to move forward in the pipeline. The challenge is that many CRM systems don't enforce this distinction. Instead, stages end up representing what the salesperson did, not what the buyer confirmed. Discovery becomes a stage because a discovery call happened. A proposal becomes a stage because a proposal was sent. And suddenly the pipeline starts filling up with deals that are based on just activity rather than proof. That's when the pipeline starts to lie to you. And again, it's not intentional, but once deals move forward without real qualification, the forecast starts to become unreliable. Now let's chat about why that happens. Now, in most sales teams, there's a natural tendency towards optimism. Salespeople are typically optimistic. Salespeople want the deal to move forward. They want to believe the opportunity is real. They want to show momentum. So if a call went well, it moves forward. If a prospect asks for a proposal, it just moves forward. If the buyer sounds interested, it moves forward. But interest is not the same as commitment. And polite buyers can sound very interested even when they have no intention of buying anything. And that's how the pipeline becomes inflated. And then over time, the CRM starts representing really hope instead of reality. Now, here's where things get interesting. When companies start tightening up their stage definitions, salespeople often push back. They're going to say things like, well, if we do that, the pipeline's going to get smaller. And the answer to that is, yes, it is going to. But that's actually a good thing. Because a smaller, honest pipeline is far more valuable to the salesperson and to the company than a larger one that can't be trusted. At least with an honest pipeline, you can make real decisions. You can forecast with confidence. You can identify, potential risk. You can see where deals are getting stuck. And you can coach your sales team effectively. When the pipeline becomes inflated, none of that is possible. Everything starts becoming guesswork. So now let's talk about what good CRM stage discipline actually looks like. Every stage in your pipeline should represent proof of a buyer's progress, not just something that the salesperson did. For example, discovery should not simply mean that the rep had a conversation. It should mean the rep confirmed the buyer's problem and understood the impact of that problem. The next stage might require identifying stakeholders or clarifying the decision criteria. And later stages might require a defined decision timeline or a scheduled proposal review meeting. In other words, each stage should represent evidence that the buyer is moving closer to a decision, not just evidence that the salesperson is busy. This is also where pipeline reviews become incredibly valuable. And unfortunately, many pipeline meetings are just status updates. The rep gives an update, the manager nods, and the deal stays exactly where it is. But a real pipeline review sounds totally different. A real pipeline review asks questions like, what problem did the buyer confirm? What impact does that problem have on their business? Who's involved in the decision? What criteria are they going to use to evaluate our solution? What timeline have they committed to? And what is the next step that has to be scheduled? And if those answers are vague or your salesperson can't answer them straight away, the deal probably does not belong in whatever stage it is sitting. And sometimes You should just move it backwards until the proof is there. Now, I know that that can feel really uncomfortable, and especially when people are worried about pipelines shrinking. But remember something really important. Moving a deal backwards is not a failure. It's just a correction. And corrections make your forecast stronger. This is also where leadership plays a really critical role. You cannot fix pipeline discipline simply by telling people to just go update the CRM better. It never works. Leadership has to define what each stage actually means, what proof is required, what criteria must be met, what questions should managers ask during pipeline reviews. And once those expectations are clear, the CRM becomes far more than just a reporting tool. It becomes a coaching tool. Managers start to see patterns. They can identify where deals stall. They can help salespeople improve discovery conversations, strengthen next steps, and clarify decision criteria. That's when the sales process starts working the way that it should. Now let's bring this back to CEOs, business owners of small and mid-sized businesses for a second. Because ultimately the pipeline should provide clarity for leadership. It should answer questions like, can I trust the forecast? Where's my risk? Do I have enough qualified opportunities? Or do we just simply have a whole lot of activity? When the pipeline is based on activity instead of qualification, those questions become very, very hard to answer. But when stages require proof, the pipeline becomes an incredibly powerful management tool. And this is one of the reasons fractional sales management can make such a big impact on small and mid-sized businesses. Most companies don't need more CRM features. In fact, I'd argue that sometimes CRMs have way too many features, which turn salespeople off from using them. They need sales leadership that will install discipline, define the process, and coaches the team around qualification. When that happens, something really interesting starts to occur. The pipeline is going to shrink, but it gets stronger. And when the pipeline becomes honest, revenue becomes much easier to manage. So I'm going to start to wrap this one up. So if your pipeline looks healthy, but revenue is still missing, the problem may not be the effort of your sales team, and it probably is not the market. There's really a good chance that the issue is in your stage discipline. When a CRM stage represents activity instead of qualification, the pipeline is going to start lying to you. Deals advance because a conversation went well, not because buyer proved they were moving towards a decision. Then the fix for this is extremely straightforward. Your CRM stages must represent proof of a buyer's progress and not just your salesperson's activity. Once that happens, the pipeline becomes cleaner, forecasts are more reliable, and leadership gains the visibility it needs to run the business effectively. All right, well, that's it for today's episode. And this also wraps up the sales qualification series that we've been running. So I hope you found it helpful and useful. There's 6 of them in that series. And if you did find this helpful, I encourage you to listen to other earlier episodes. Or if you know a CEO or a business leader or owner that could use this information, send them a link so that they can listen to the podcast. And if you would like to learn more about us, you can always go to transformativesalessystems.com and find all kinds of information there, along with all of the original articles that I use to create the Selling Point podcast. So once again, I thank you all for listening. I appreciate you all. And thank you for listening to the Selling Point podcast.